Let's raise those questions that it seems no one either wants to ask and certainly no one seems to answer. Is the US trying to arm twist India on oil purchases? Is India's strategic autonomy protected or will it be hit if the United States dictates terms on oil purchases? Will India actually halt oil imports from Russia or only diversify its basket further? Will there be friction within with the Trump administration on this issue? Joining me now, our special guest, Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad is 26th US representative to the UN, a former US ambassador. KC Singh is former Indian ambassador, and Dr. Brahma Chellaney is strategic affairs expert. Thank you all very much for joining us. Before I come to you, I just want to play what Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri has said today on the contentious issue, maintaining that the foremost priority, he said, was to safeguard the interests of Indian consumers, but added oil refiners will decide where to import oil from depending on market conditions. Listen in to him and then we'll come to our guests.
Our approach is to maintain multiple sources of supply and diversify them as appropriate to ensure stability. Therefore, I would say that the more diversified we are in this area, the more secure we are. Insofar as actual sourcing of energy is concerned, again, all of you follow this closely, so you know that the actual sourcing is done by oil companies in the public sector, oil companies in the private sector. And they make decisions based on market conditions. They assess availability at any given point in time. They assess risks, they assess costs in this process. And obviously all of these companies also have their own internal accountability related processes to look at and certain fiduciary responsibilities in the market.
Okay, let me take that to you, Dr. Brahma Chellaney first. Dr. Chellaney, you've come out and said you've already raised questions certainly on Twitter or X about this ambiguity over oil purchases. Now the government is saying, look, we have multiple sources and it is for private oil refiners to decide based on market conditions. Can you really say that the US is arm twisting India?
Let's be clear on one thing, Rajdeep. The issue is not about India's Russian oil purchases. It was never about India's Russian oil purchases. If it was about Russian energy imports, the US would have gone after the largest and second largest importers of Russian energy, which are China and the EU. But it has taken no action against either. In fact, Washington is currently negotiating a deal with Moscow that will extend to the energy sector after the Ukraine war is over. The issue is about forcing India to turn its back on Russian energy supplies so that India buys higher priced US energy. It is about tying India's energy security to a more expensive and geographically distant supplier, the US. In a way, history is repeating itself. After Trump in his first term imposed a blanket ban on Iranian energy exports, India halted all its oil imports from Iran. Iran is geographically the closest supplier for India, and traditionally, Iran has offered its oil to India at a discount to the Brent benchmark. Because of the US sanctions, the heavily discounted Iranian crude remains the world's cheapest, much cheaper than even Russian oil. But India's termination of oil imports from Iran made China the almost exclusive buyer of Iranian energy. But more importantly, India, after ending its energy relationship with Iran, began buying American oil and gas in a major way. If you see the data from 2019 onwards, how India's imports from the US rose sharply. Now, by squeezing India on Russian oil purchases, Trump is hoping that India will succumb to US pressure once again and become a top energy client of the US. After all, India in that interim trade deal has already committed to buying $500 billion worth of American products over the next 5 years. $500 billion, India's total annual budget is only about $600 billion. So you can imagine the scale
Right.
of India's commitment, and quite a bit of that commitment will have to go to buying American energy.
You're making an important point, and this is what I want to take to you there in America, Zalmay Khalilzad, that you've got Donald Trump saying in an executive order issued by the White House that India is committed not to buy oil directly or indirectly from Russia. And as Brahma Chellaney is saying, China gets away by buying Russian oil. EU is buying Russian oil. America is about to have an agreement on energy with Russia, possibly. So it appears from an Indian perspective, although New Delhi is not saying it, that America is trying to arm twist India to force them to buy more expensive US/Venezuelan oil rather than buy Russian oil. Do you see it in those terms? Is this Donald Trump arm twisting India, sir?
Well, first of all, it's a great honor to be with you. US and India have the objective of increasing their partnership. And a key element of that partnership, an area that I focus on, security issues, is working together where there is a common interest. And Ukraine, ending the war in Ukraine, is an important Indian and American objective. And one way to press for ending that conflict is reducing Russian financial resources, and oil is one of the key sources of income.
Sir, but why, sir, with due regard, sir, why is the same rule not applied to a China or a EU? I mean, China is the biggest purchaser of oil from Russia. At no stage is the United States putting similar pressure on Beijing. Why only on New Delhi, sir?
Well, we have put a lot of pressure on our other partners in Europe, for example, over many years to not import Russian gas. And in fact, that huge progress has been made due to US pressure in the reduction of European purchases of Russian gas, which was a huge source of income. I think we continue to press China and Europe, almost anyone of significance that imports.
But Ambassador, I'm going to, this is an executive order. In an executive order for the White House to say India has committed not to purchase Russian oil. I mean, it is almost as if the US is now going to monitor it. In fact, that's also said that the Commerce Secretary of the US, Mr. Lutnick, will monitor it. I mean, is this the United States believing that they can bulldoze New Delhi? I ask you this again. Why not the same for Beijing? Why not put an executive order of similar, in a similar manner to that involves China, sir?
Well, I would respond by saying I don't speak first for the administration. I am a private citizen. That increasing pressure on China to reduce imports of Russian oil, I would support that. This has to be taken into account. But we have pressed our partners, whether it's India or European countries, to reduce, in fact, to end the import of energy resources from Russia, because that finances the war, which we all say we want that war to end, and India has been active in its own right to help end that war.
I take your point, but KC Singh, it seems a little strange the way that executive order was framed by Donald Trump. Is this typical Donald Trump maybe catering to his domestic constituency? Or is this Donald Trump sending a message to India that, look, you follow the commitments I've said, otherwise who knows, tomorrow morning I'll restore the 25% penalty. How should India see it? The manner in which this has been framed and the fact that the Indian government is passing the buck. You ask the Commerce Minister, he says, please talk to the External Affairs Minister. Ask the External Affairs Minister, he says, please talk to the Commerce Minister.
That's precisely what is creating the problem. You see, the management of media, we saw after Operation Sindoor, we saw in case of a number of things, the media management is very centralized and they try not sharing the information rather than explaining to the media and to the people what exactly is happening. In fact, the Chinese, you see the information today, have already upped their imports from Russia. They're going to pick up that oil which India was taking immediately. It's gone up by 1 million barrels. And President Trump is headed to China. He's going to be talking to them. He calls it a G2. He's really treating China entirely differently. China, high tariffs were levied on China, but then he rolled them back when the Chinese used the rare earths argument and said, we'll stop the rare earths to you, which means that the way to deal with Trump is to have something in your pocket with which you can negotiate and exert counter pressure. Whereas India has kind of sat back and we waited, and then all of a sudden we do this, and neither they nor the details are available, nor India is willing to fully explain what's happening. But you take this Ukraine war, the justification for India being forced to stop the oil import is to help stop the Ukraine war. Now, Ukraine war is affecting Europe more than it's affecting President Trump. The Europeans came and did a free trade agreement. They didn't put any condition on India that you stop importing oil from Russia. They're the ones affected by the Ukraine war. The way the Ukraine war can be ended is President Trump should be helping militarily the Ukrainians. He's pulled back that support. So, it's all just a very complex argument, but very simply what he's doing is trade deals are not trade deals. Trade deals are normally about balancing trade. He's using tariffs to try influencing the geopolitics or the diplomacy of another country and make it subservient to his opinions and his views. And I think that's what's happening here. Let me give you a counter argument. Why don't we put a condition in the trade agreement that tomorrow, if he pampers Pakistan and there's a terrorist attack on India, then we'll impose tariffs on him. That would be the equivalent of this. But there he's pampering their army chief. He's talking to them. He has no problem with that. If you bring in geopolitics into trade, then India can also have arguments. And it's just not justifiable. And the government is just ducking. And that's not
Mr. KC Singh, what could India say? Very, very quickly, what could India say if Donald Trump says in his, how could India respond? What is the geopolitical strategy that India has to put pressure on America?
Maybe publicly not. But what you could say in private is, if you do this, we have said we'll give you zero tariffs. We don't even know if we're getting zero tariffs on how much of Indian exports. It's not clear as yet. And the 20 punitive tariffs, there's a threat of reimposing them. Then addition is announced, any trade with Iran means that there'll be punitive tariffs. So he's influencing your foreign policy, and you have not imposed any condition. We certainly, privately, we should have told them, if you go on pampering Pakistan, the way you are pampering them, then I'm sorry, it's affecting India's national security. And we'll also bring it into a trade discussions. We're doing trade discussions, and he's doing a broad-based trade, come geopolitics, come diplomacy, come strategic leverage, a complex thing.
Okay, I want to bring in Brahma back on this. Brahma Chellaney, what are India's options, realistic options? Any negotiations involve an element of give and take. Given the fact that we want this trade deal at all costs, we don't want a 25% penalty. Somewhere down the line, we've had to meet the Americans halfway is the argument. I'm going to put up the numbers of how already the oil purchases from Russia have reduced significantly in the last 6 months. What option does India have? Can India look the Americans in the eye and say that we will not purchase Russian oil? I'll ask my producer to put the figures of how our dependence on Russian oil, and the government says private refineries have to decide. It's the Reliances of the world who have to decide whether they want to get windfall profits from buying cheap Russian oil and then refining them here and then selling them in the high seas.
Rajdeep, let me ask a counter question. How is it that tiny Singapore faces only a 10% US tariff, and India, after all these concessions as part of the interim trade deal, will face 18% tariff? Why? The reason is, first and foremost, in fact, one of the cardinal principles of international negotiations is that you do not negotiate at gunpoint. You don't negotiate when the other side has imposed sanctions or unveiled threats against you. The US negotiated with India after keeping India under 50% punitive tariffs for 6 months. It was in this period, 6-month period, when India made these concessions. But now look at the structure of the deal. The structure is very important. In this deal, India's concessions are immediate and quantified. The American quote-unquote concessions are conditional or largely corrective, such as a reduction of previously imposed penalties. Indian commitments are to be monitored. US commitments are reversible. For India, the deal is just a restoration of US market access that was taken away by the punitive tariffs of last year. But for the US, the deal is a significant expansion of Indian market access. And one other point, Washington today is essentially charging India an 18% fee to enter the American market while demanding India open its own market for zero fee. This is the essence of the deal.
Right.
Now, how is it that Singapore is a better negotiator than India? Why? Why don't we learn from smaller countries how to negotiate? How do you negotiate? How do you negotiate with America when you are under withering 50% tariffs? You try to be the good boy. You refuse to have any counter tariffs imposed on the US. You decide that you will negotiate while under those draconian tariffs. The result is what we see today.
I take your point, but I want to also get a counter. Zalmay Khalilzad, do you really believe that this, in the manner in which Brahma Chellaney is putting this structure of this deal is one-sided, where America is setting all the conditions, oil being one of them? Do you believe that it is one-sided, or you believe it's that is not how we should view this deal? We should view this as a major breakthrough.
I am of the view that this is a major and important breakthrough, although the details have to be still negotiated. It's a framework agreement at this point. And that if you read the US media and discussions here, like India being a democratic society and polity, there is a lot of criticism of the US, of the administration position, that nothing has changed fundamentally in the Indian stance since the imposition of the additional tariffs, and that this was done because of the success that India had with EU on a free trade agreement, that India stood rather firm in terms of its position. So yes, of course, both sides, analysts and those who follow this in detail, will have questions. Congress would get involved in the United States, and Parliament will get involved in India. But
Right.
I believe, given and the geopolitical and geoeconomic circumstances in which the world is today, and given President Trump's use of tariffs as a tool, which is very unique to him personally, to advance U.S. interests as he sees them.
Right.
This is, I think, probably as a result of a lot of hard work and involvement of the two leaders to judge that this is at this time in the best interest of both countries.
30 seconds only, KC Singh. Therefore, going ahead, do you believe when India says we are diversifying, the official MEA statement is we have a diverse oil basket? Should we take it at face value? A very quick comment.
Well, the problem is not that you won't get oil from elsewhere, although Trump would like you to buy the Venezuelan oil. That's all good. Even Ambani is very happy with it because his refineries like that oil. But the issue is that it's likely to affect your relationship with Russia. So which means oil is being used as a weapon to detach you from Russia, which has been traditionally a very reliable partner, ally of India, and has helped us during difficult times. Right. So, it is a way of influencing your foreign policy, not just your commercial or trade policy or your petrochemical policy. That is no issue. You'll get it from somewhere else. And the price is low in any case at the moment, unless the war breaks out in Iran. But if you allow yourself, you've had a new yardstick, it's been fixed, which means a future president knows how to press India, will press you accordingly. It means that India can be pressurized like this. And that is, I think you said, You're setting an example which is not a good example. Just very quickly, Rajdeep, so the cases of the tariffs is before the US Supreme Court. It still hasn't given a verdict. It's possible that the tariffs are removed anyway. Secondly, he's going to China. Trump is going to China. We could have waited for that to see that his differences multiply with China. He might have come back to us with a better deal. Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it there. I've heard various viewpoints. Clearly, this oil question will continue to roil. And therefore, unless there is complete clarity on it, questions will continue to be raised. What was the backroom deal within a deal, if any, that was done when it came to Russian oil? Russia, importantly, says they have not heard anything from India on the issue yet. Thank you all to my guests for joining me on my talking point tonight.